Welcome to Island Time with Wahine. This is my guest, Christian Beat Hirt, also known as Me and My Toothbrush. Christian is a Swiss musician and producer who has been a constant force in the music industry since the 90s. He is the label owner of Enormous Tunes, amongst other imprints, and has launched the Me and My Toothbrush alias in 2013. This particular project is focused on disco and new funk, fusing together organic guitar sounds with analog synths, resulting in a fresh and clean musical blend, giving listeners the real toothbrush feel. I find the name so charming and kind of unexpected. Can you tell me where that originated?
Thank you very much first for having me.
Sure.
Actually, I wanted to pick another name. The initial name for the project was Jack and Wolfskin, but my distributor somehow came back and said, this might end up getting you into troubles if you're using a name that might be copyrighted and trademarked and stuff.
Okay.
So you would rather pick another name. And so I was like, I had to make a decision quite fast because I already had the first release lined up and everything. And so I was like, how about Me and My Toothbrush? Which was just kind of like a reaction to the email that I got from my distributor. And they were like, that works. And I ended up having that name for
it's
that
very
project.
memorable, I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, but since it is like a little special, weirdish, goofy sound, so it fits quite well, doesn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say that about the music that you produce under that name, but there's a playfulness there that I can see comes through in your music.
Yes, that's right. That was the intention from the very first day, to kind of go more for the funkier stuff, more the organic sounds, the disco sounds, but still having the club sound that these tracks are still working on a dance floor, in a dance floor environment. And so I tried to just bring in these elements, but have dance floor tracks, which was the idea of the project.
Right. So what else were you working on at the time that you felt like I need to expand into this area?
Well, I work a lot with music that is synthesizer based and has much of synthesizer and hybrid sounds and stuff like this. So I wanted to create something that is based on organic sounds, like that does really like take the inspiration from a totally different world of music and artists, has totally different influences, and does not really interfere with this synthesizer-based music that I usually do.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the early days for you. So you've been around doing this since the 90s. So take me back to your early days. Where were you? What were you listening to? If you were clubbing, where were you? Who were your biggest influences?
How early do you want to go back?
Take me wherever you want to go.
I started to make music since I'm basically a kid, but I basically started to have two boom boxes, like cassette tapes. I would record one, and when I recorded a track, I would put the cassette tape behind me and would record another track on the other cassette tape, and would kind of like switch the cassettes back and forth. And that was my first multi-track recording system.
Was that a process that you kind of figured out on your own, or?
I mean, I figured that out on my own because I didn't have any other options. I was a kid and I did this in my bedroom, driving my mom crazy, and these were my very first trials in music.
Were you playing keyboard or what?
All sorts of keyboard sounds, because it was already then for me somehow the only option to because I wanted to make music from the scratch everything by myself. And this would only work if I would concentrate on something like a keyboard, because I figured out the synthesizer, I can basically imitate a kick drum, I can create a snare drum, but I also can create some kind of pad or a lead sound, and eventually end up with a full track, right? I was never really feeling comfortable with the bands, because you would always have to rely on bandmates. And if one of these guys would basically fall in love with a girl, then he would take the afternoon off and keep the rehearsal and stuff. So you would always be like, okay.
You've always been dedicated to the music, I can tell.
Yeah, kind of be the driving force to keep a band together instead of focusing on making music. So I realized quite early that with electronic music, I could do a song from the first spark of idea basically to the finished product. I mean, if you would call it finished product, because basically, obviously in the very beginning of when I started to make music, I didn't have much of an equipment that I could really make my music on. But it started eventually that I would put something like I would pin something on the school billboard that I would produce, or I would record singers, or I would offer to record someone's birthday wishes for their grandma, or wedding stuff, right? So that brought me the first little jobs, and so I could afford a little bit more than just the 2 cassette tapes that I was recording on. And
so what was the next level of gear after the cassette tapes?
After the cassette tapes, I think I went for a computer. I had a school friend, and he was really into computers already at that time, and he's now one of the biggest programmers. And at that time, he was like, I can create a computer for only a fraction of the price that you would actually pay if you would buy the computer already done with everything set up, right, and installed. So I basically bought the parts that he told me to buy, and he would build it for me. So that was the first computer that I had, and this became of my core of everything that came after. So then I got myself an Archive 2000 sampler, but since my computer was so already like advanced, I already had the option of including audio files or wave files into that. I think it was the very first version of Cubase that I had, somewhere in the mid-90s. And so I could already import wave files, and I did not have to feed a sampler, which was really, really complicated to handle at the time with these little screens that they had, these green screens. I had to scroll through menus and submenus and submenus.
Oh my gosh, it didn't even occur to me that you were doing this on a green screen.
Yes. But somehow I never really had to get into it too much, because I was already having this computer from my friend, which I had quite for a while. It was like, I would say up until the beginning of the 2000s, I worked on this computer. And then
Thank goodness for your friend. Thank goodness for your friend.
Yeah. I think he helped me a lot with being able to create this computer and set up everything, even introduced me to this Cubase that I had no idea that this was actually possible, because back in the days we were taught that you have to record on a tape machine, and then from the big consoles on the tape machine and stuff like that. And this was so far away from what I could afford at the time that I was like, I could never get there. So how else then on my cassette tapes I can actually make music and sound a little more professional? Because at that time it was really determining if you would be able to compete with the pros or not, right?
Yeah.
Because cassette tape, you would really hear a difference to what these guys would sound like if they would go into a big studio and record everything on a nice equipment. Nowadays, it's totally different. All the kids have a laptop. They can install Logic or Ableton or Pro Tools or whatever, DAW, and they already have amazing stock plugins on all of these DAWs already. So everyone has the same start, actually. And back in the days, this was not really given. So you might have gotten rejected by a record company because you didn't have the option of recording your music professionally, right? Mm-hmm. So that was something that was really helping me at the time, that I had a computer that I could actually compete with the pros. But it still took me a lot of time until I got the first record deals and stuff. But at least I had the tools to make music and to kind of like learn what I had to learn and to get where I had to go.
Did you have someone mentoring you through all of this? It sounded like you have access to a lot that probably most people didn't. So were you just learning your way through it, or was someone holding your hand?
At that time, actually, in the very beginning, I didn't. And I think that was, I mean, I was having a teacher that was a rock and roll musician, and he could basically show me how I can cable a studio, right? How XLR and TRS works, and what the difference is, how you would loop the whole cable system or the MIDI system. He introduced me as well, but else than that, I basically had to figure out everything on my own. But it took much longer for me to get on a level where I would say I sounded professional than what these kids nowadays have, because they can go on YouTube, they can type in all sorts of problems that or plateaus that they run into, and they find someone that explains them exactly how they can avoid this or how they can get faster to wherever they want to get. So
at the level that you're at, given how long you've been doing this, this is what you do. Do you ever go to YouTube to figure anything out, or you've got your system down?
No, actually, I really like to use that tool, because I think that's a tool nowadays that is there and that I make a lot of use of. Just only maybe not only to. Sometimes it's just to see what options are there. Sometimes it's also to check out a plugin or a sample library before I actually buy it, right? To see what am I buying. Or sometimes it's just to see how does someone get there to a certain point. How does someone create a sound? Even if I would know how to create that kind of sound, but someone else sometimes creates it in a very different way, but gets the same result, right? So that's very interesting for me sometimes to see how other people get to the same result, or just like how they are handling certain things. And no, I'm really actually using this tool of YouTube and all these tutorials.
So it sounds like you're still very much a student of all of this. The technology, and well, it's all constantly changing, right? There's always a new thing, and they're so complex. Like there's a million different ways to get to the same result. So seeing how other people do it, it can be illuminating too.
Exactly. Yes, it sometimes just helps me also to get my mindset off of this kind of like tunnel view when you're in studio and you're just like concentrating on one little thing. And this could kind of like get you also to really someplace else, and sometimes also inspiring you, right? To start something new or to try out new things. So
yeah. So speaking of inspiration, in the early days, like who were you listening to? Who were the big influences?
Well, I actually started to listening to rock, heavy metal first, because I grew up in the 90s, being a teenager in the 90s. So I grew up with Guns N' Roses, Meatloaf, these kind of things that I really used to love listening to. But then somehow when I was 13, 14 and started to do my own electronic stuff, then there were some TV shows in Germany that kind of broadcasted only this kind of music. So what did at the time, like Westbam, Marusha, the German techno pioneers, or I mean, not really pioneers, because I mean there was Kraftwerk and stuff way before. But for me, these were the first guys that I actually looked up to and saw their video clips on TV and heard their music on the radio and stuff, and I tried to imitate that.
So you were making techno early on?
Yes, I started with kind of like techno, and it started to already get into this classic house thing. Like Mousse T came a few years later and started to introduce the basically close to what I'm doing with Me and My Toothbrush nowadays, getting all this organic guitar and funk sounds into music. And yes, then later on in the 2000s, trance took over because of all these big raves that started to take over in Europe. That was a big thing. Also for me, I kind of spent every weekend on raves. And
I was going to ask, were you in the clubs or were you just, you know, consuming the music from home?
At that time, I was actively going from party to party. Yes, but that's.
And who were you going to see? I mean,
these were already festivals that that had 200 DJs on the lineup, right? So someone would, for example, rent a big industrial warehouse, and then they would put up a few stages. And it was like really in the beginning, at the end of the 90s, in the beginning of the 2000s, when here in Switzerland they started to have one of these major raves, they would call them, one after another. And this was really fascinating for me. And it was not really about just someone particular, but it was about the whole movement for me, right? I mean, we all had this special clothing. We would eat certain kinds of foods and stuff. This was all, it was everything kind of like a part.
There was a whole culture.
Yes, it was kind of like our Woodstock, right? If that makes sense. So we would rebel, we would kind of figure out who we actually are. And the music was one of our tools to express us or to be different from anyone else, or to just show that we have found something that our parents do not really understand. And I don't know, that's kind of like how it started. And of course it was also about friendship a lot, right? You would never go on your own to these major raves. You would go in groups. Sometimes you
had community
and bosses, yes, that would take a full group or 10, 20 guys. And yes, that was a cool time. It was long gone, but it kind of started the whole thing, and it also started the understanding for me of how this music works. I knew it before I would go to these major raves. I knew it from the radio. I knew it from TV, and I would already actively producing it in my bedroom, right? But I didn't really understand what I was doing, because I just did what I hear on TV or radio and I tried to imitate it. But when I went to major raves, I started to understand why a track would work on the dance floor and why someone would create a track the way they created the tracks. So this helped me a lot.
So how do we hear all of those early influences in the music that you make today?
I mean, you hear it that I'm still doing mainly music for the DJs, mainly doing music for the dance floor. But if I would have to pick out something particular, then I would say you hear it maybe the way I create a breakdown or something, because it was always fascinating me when I went to these raves, how someone can build up energy and tension throughout the breakdown and have the crowd so much into the sound that basically they would go crazy when it finally would drop, right? And that's something that I still try to incorporate and try to build in my tracks as much as I can.
And I definitely hear that. Great breakdowns.
Thank you.
I initially thought that my first interaction with your music was Funking Around, which was a track that I bought whatever year that was that it came out. But in looking at doing a little bit of digging and looking at the artwork and thinking, this looks familiar or something, and then realizing that you work with Nora En Pure, I looked back and I went, okay, you wrote Morning Dew, which was 2016, I believe, which is this beautiful, ethereal kind of piano track, sun setting, flying over Ibiza, kind of, if I could give a visual, that's what I see in my head. Can you tell me about when, I'm sure folks watching this will know Nora En Pure, like how did you guys come to work together and what was the process of creating that track?
The particular track actually was laying around for like a year, and we were not really sure if we should release it or not, because it somehow was too dreamy for us, right?
It's beautiful. It really is dreamy, but it's beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. We created it just, I think it didn't even take us 5 hours, but we thought it would not really work on the dance floors. And then we put it aside, and I think it was someone from our distribution team that said, this is a really cool song, and I can imagine that DJs play this even if it's a little on the relaxing, chillier side. And then we gave it a shot, and we were really surprised that it, even on Beatport, which is a store actually mainly for DJs, it worked out pretty well, which surprised me.
Well, it's a beautiful track. I'm not surprised. I can't remember whose mix I heard it in, but I remember going back to that mix just to listen to that song over and over again. But going back to Funking Around, so that was a #1 on Beatport amongst several #1s that you've garnered as Me and My Toothbrush. So I'm going to assume you have a formula for a #1 track because you've been able to make it happen multiple times. What is your formula for a #1?
I mean, if it's that simple, if it would be that simple to have a formula and kind of go by a formula, then everyone would do it, and we could put the formula online, and then everyone also makes tracks like that. It's unfortunately not that easy, and it involves a lot of outtakes. It involves a lot of days when I go downstairs in the evenings and I'm like, oh man, I could have done something totally different today, but I wasted it in my studio and I did not produce something that actually sparked anything. So it takes a lot of tryouts. But then it might be that you have, as for example, Morning Dew and also Funking Around was a track, and a lot of my tracks that actually work better than others are tracks that come naturally and they are not taking too much time. Those that I really like force and take a week to produce and do everything very detailed and go over it again and change this and change that, those, I don't know, those somehow, at least I can speak only for me, they do not really work out as I sometimes want them to work out.
This is a continuing theme. Every single interview I've ever done
right.
with producers, it's always the ones that come quickly that are the most successful.
Right. I even started to, like, if I work on a track more than 3 days, I'm kind of throw it away. Or I just take parts of it and restart a complete new project sometimes. Because then, as I just said, it gets too forced, and you're not neutral anymore in the decisions. For example, in Funking Around, I had this vocal sample, and I thought this is really cool, and I created the beat, and the breakdown was kind of an accident because I forgot to, I actually wanted to drop with something else, but somehow I had the loop function on the vocal on and forgot to mute it at the time when the kick would hit, right? And then when I listened back, the vocal was still in it when the kick came, and it sounded like, oh, wow.
It's so good. The way the breakdown is so good in that track. Yeah. Happy accidents. You got to be open to them.
Absolutely, yes. That's I would say 50% of everything that I do are happy accidents.
That's good. That's good that you're open to it. Like you said, like otherwise it gets forced, and then you can somehow you can hear that. I don't know how, but you can hear it. It doesn't hit, and so it doesn't hit naturally either.
Right. Even if the track sometimes is cool, and sometimes I really have hopes how highs for some of these tracks, but they sometimes just don't really work out, and I understand why, because I overthought it, right? Yeah.
So you've remixed some of the biggest names in the game: Beyoncé, Tiësto, David Guetta. How does your approach differ when you're remixing popular music versus underground dance music? Or does it?
The biggest difference is I do not have to search or fish for a theme, because I already get this given by a track. By the time that I agree to do a remix, I basically already heard it a few times. I thought about what is possible, how I could flip this into a cool remix, and what I could do with what elements. So I'm not starting from base zero. I'm starting already with the idea from the original track, and basically just have to remake or remix the track. And that saves a lot of time. And it basically makes me start with the fun part of the producing, because I do not have to fish for that certain theme anymore, that outstanding thing in a track, or that certain special something that sometimes I'm trying to look for and try to have in my track, so that they somehow stand out, and someone at the bar drinking a beer would not basically just don't know what happens, but he would kind of like turn around and say, what happened? And with a remix, I already have that from the original composer or producer. So yeah, that helps me a lot. So I go straight to building a certain beat, maybe play with chord progressions if I think I can do something better than what they already have. Sometimes I just leave the chord progressions as they have it and build just a nice sound design, or maybe a new drop or whatever. But that's basically the fun part of the producing for me, right?
What is that process like? Do you get feedback from them? Is there a back and forth? Can you ask for a new take or something? You just get the stems and go?
That depends. It depends. It depends what the vision of the artist is, if the management also has a certain input, if they have a certain strategy in their mind to promote the remix, then sometimes they have certain inputs, because they, like, for example, if the management or the record company says, well, we want to make a radio promotion, try to have it as radio friendly as possible, then I try to work out something like this. Or if the management says we want to have your mix, especially for the beatboard and DJ market, then I try to concentrate on that, right? But sometimes I get the stems and they're like, let's hear what you will come up with, and I just try out. Those I actually like the most, right? I think.
So you were nominated for a Grammy for your remix with EDX of Charlie Puth's How Long in 2019. Did you have that on your bucket list of things to do when being nominated for a Grammy, or that just happened?
I mean, every track or every remix you do, you believe 100% in it. So I could say in all the 2000 compositions and productions that I was involved in the past 20 years, I was actually hoping for getting an Emmy, a Grammy, or getting Grammy nominated. But of course, in the real world, I did never think of anything like that this could happen with this remix or any other of my tracks. That was something that was so far away for me at the time, and when it happened, I really couldn't believe it first. I felt being on cloud 7.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
But yes, I was very happy about it, and it helped me a lot also in the music industry, so people understand that they can expect kind of like music on a certain quality level. That's what this probably indicates somehow.
So it opened some doors for you, it sounds like.
Maybe not even opening up some doors. It was just basically like people would trust me with their tracks to maybe master, remix, mix it down. Maybe also major labels who were not really sure if they would really want to hire us for remixing their tracks gave us a shot after that. So there, it might have helped us, yes.
Very nice. So let's talk a little bit about Enormous Tunes, your label. If an artist was interested in signing a track with you, what advice would you give them? What sound are you looking for?
Be original and have quality music. That's what I'm looking for, actually, in the first place. To have tracks that are somehow original, even if they are a little bit too original. I prefer this rather than tracks that are just copying something. Like, obviously, copied tracks is not really what I'm looking for, even though maybe nowadays is the time for exactly this kind of producing. But for us, I think I am obligated to support artists and music that is original. And maybe I'm also comparing, or maybe I'm also trying to find music that I would actually be proud of if I would have produced it myself, right? Since I'm a producer, I maybe look a little different to what I'm signing. So I'm signing music if a track inspires me.
Got it. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This is Island Time, so we do a little Island Time themed speed round of questions. You're stranded on an island. You get to pick the island. Where would you like to get stranded?
On which island? On which island? I mean, the UK is an island, so.
Is that where you want to get stranded, though?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I'm the guy that prefers to go to the mountains instead of going to the sea. Right?
There are mountains on islands.
Yeah, it's true, actually.
Hawaii's got mountains.
Yeah, but I heard the flight there is terribly like shaking and stuff, and I'm like a little. So I'm not sure if I ever end up there, unless I'm gonna get there by a boat or something.
Okay, well, we can get you there by boat.
Okay. I would love to be stranded on one of these Italian islands.
Okay.
Like Sardinia or something like this.
Okay. You get to take 2 collaborators with you. Who are they?
2 collaborators.
Anybody.
Oh, that's a tough question. That's a tough question. I would take and they have to join me there if they want or not, right?
Yeah.
Okay. First, I would probably pick Chunky XL, which is nowadays a producer for film music, but he used to be a producer for electronic music as well. And I really admire how he was able to produce so many different types of music. And yes, it would definitely help if he could teach me certain things. And the second one, let's go for a singer here, because I think with the Chunky and me as producer, we could, I think, produce everything that needs to be produced, but a singer that could offer a great top line. And there, I have to say my wife, because she's a singer, and if she sees this interview, she's going to kill me if I don't say.
Very nice. For multiple reasons. You better take your wife with you. Okay, so last one, 3 albums to keep you inspired. What 3 would you take with you?
I just yesterday actually listened to the very first album of Tiësto, which is In My Memory. I think the first one is In My Memory. And this was an album that inspired me a lot when I had to transition from that kind of house that I did in the 90s to the trance music that I produced then in the early 2000s. And I think this music is still nowadays something that I think is perfectly crafted, perfectly produced, and can still nowadays be dropped on any dance floor, and I'm sure it would work. Then, as a musician, I have to pick the album Bad Out of Hell #2 from Meatloaf. And this is just something because I grew up with this album. It was, I think, released in 1992 or 1993. And it was, all songs were written by Jim Steinman, which was a songwriter who died a few years ago, and a producer. And he had this really distinctive kind of sound that he produced. And combined with the vocals of Meatloaf, who had a really distinctive vocal, this was something that was so fascinating me, how this would work together, how they would work together, how someone, because the album was different from all these concept albums that I used to buy before as a kid, right? It was also a concept album, but it was not really like, I don't know. I just felt like the love that this involved by making it, right? How they would work out certain things, how a song can be 9.5 minutes, right? Basically, always playing the same melody, more or less, but having it never being boring over 9 or 10 minutes. That was really fascinating me. And then I saw these guys, at least Meatloaf, on tour as well, which was one of my first concerts that my mom would let me go to. And also there, they played all of these tracks even longer. Sometimes they played a track 15 or 20 minutes. And this is up until today something that I really admire. And I hate all these bands who play live the same 3.5 minutes as they are on the record, right? This is something that up until nowadays, I love if a band is extending or reimagining a track beyond just the 3.5 minutes that you hear on the radio. And that's what Meatloaf did. And
I just love hearing the jam sessions. There's so many tracks that are just fading out, and I'm like, keep going.
Right. I mean, it's just
getting good, and they're fading out.
I know we are in the Spotify age, and I understand why artists would do that. But at least when it comes to live, make sure that, because you do not have to be in a 3.5 minute pace, you can break out, introduce solos, guitar solos. I used to love guitar solos. I even, when I was a kid, I used to take tracks, only the guitar solos, and I would loop them for like 5-10 minutes, right? So I just had the guitar solo in whatever ways repeating up until the wazoo. So thing that I miss.
Right on. So that was 2 out of 3. What's the last one?
The last album that I would pick, what's that? I'd also have to pick it around that time in the 90s, because that was really when I listened a lot of music, and not really dance music, but all sorts of rock. I also love country music. So maybe we have to pick one from the country music corner. I would pick Reba McEntire, Rumors Has It. That was an album that got me hooked to country music. So you see, I have a lot of influences actually, and they did not even maybe try to sound like it, but somehow it influenced me in a certain way. Anyways, and country music kind of let me have that certain rock thing without, because in the 90s rock music got really into the heavy metal kind of stuff, and it got harder and faster, and death metal and thrash metal and stuff like this was introduced, and this was not really my direction somehow. So I enjoyed the melodies up until nowadays. I enjoy a beautiful melody over a track that is just just entertaining a big party crowd. So country music in that time kind of gave me that major rock music at that time couldn't give me anymore, because it would go in a different direction.
Yeah, country singers are real singers.
Right, and they tell stories, and that's when I actually started to understand that you also can tell a story not just by the music, but also by the lyrics. And that was very fascinating. I learned English through that. Actually, I would just translate all the lyrics from this kind of tracks and try to understand what they tried to come across with.
What an interesting way to learn English.
Yeah.
So poetic, such a poetic way to learn English, I would say.
Yeah. I just had English one year in school, basically the very last year, because here in Switzerland we have 4 different languages in a really small country. So we actually have to learn French as our second language in school, and the third language then would be Italian, right? And then the English is basically the 4th language that they would introduce in school. So I started learning it very late, and when I learned it in school, I knew most of it already, because I've learned it from translating all these lyrics already.
Wow, that's a process, but
yeah.
So I'm about manifesting some shit. So tell me and tell the world, who do you want to remix next? Who do you want to collaborate with? Do you want that Grammy award, not just a nomination? Like, what's next for you?
I'm not really working for something that specific, actually. I am happy if I can do what I'm doing now, if I can do music that is making me happy every day. If it gets to be a Grammy one day or another Grammy nomination, that would be awesome, definitely. But it's not something that I incorporate in my strategy to be there in 2 years and be there in 4 years or something. I just take it day by day still.
Sure. Is there an artist that's really exciting to you that you would be interested in working with?
Not really, because not really. Nowadays, I would rather pick a song rather than an artist, right? So sometimes it can be a song that is very inspiring for me to remix, and I would approach the management or the label, and sometimes I even offer to remix, right? Sometimes they approach us and send us tracks, sometimes unreleased tracks, and I hear the potential to do something out of a track, but it's not that I have someone in mind that I have on my bucket list or something that I really have to or want to remix now.
Who are you listening to a lot of right now? Is there anyone who's kind of on repeat for you?
Right now, I'm not listening too much of music, and that's the reason, because I mean, I'm working like 6 days a week, sometimes up to 12 hours. And then when I'm done working, I'm kind of like enjoying the silence a little bit, or being with my family and stuff.
You have to let your ears rest if you're doing it for that many hours.
Oh yes, it's for example, I get so many invitations for Chris, come to this party, Chris, come to this club, Chris, let's go here, let's go there. And I'm like, I can understand you that you want to do this because you are working 9 to 5 in an office, and in the evening you want to have a little bit of cool music and a few drinks. But for me, I already have
the music
from 9 to 5 or from 8 to 7 or whatever, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, it doesn't. Sometimes it's not really necessary. I don't need it anymore. Because I used up the whole energy in the studio already producing music. And then, yeah, the older that I get, the more that I enjoy the silence.
Okay, so maybe we need to manifest a Sicilian vacation with lots of quiet time.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, last thing, where can everyone find you and your music, and talk about any projects that you want people to know about that are coming up?
Well, I'm not touring myself, if you mean that. So people actually would have to explore my music on the usual platforms, Spotify, Beat Hirt, YouTube, wherever one consumes music. And
so give me all of the aliases, Me and My Toothbrush, and I know you produce under several other names as well.
Well, I do not want to list now things here, because for some of these projects, I'm just like a guest producer sometimes, and then I do not think that I have to list this as a continuous project that I work with. I mean, the usual suspect projects are quite out there, and this is something that everyone finds very easily nowadays. What my future plans are, right now we are still in Switzerland till end of July. Then we are going back for a few months to Nashville. So I look forward to working my Nashville studio again.
You'll be close to me. I'm in Atlanta.
Oh yes, yeah. And spending all the nice Christmas season in Nashville. We are working on, I definitely work on new Me and My Toothbrush music. Just right now, before we started the meeting, I was starting a new track. We have a few pretty cool Nora En Pure tracks that we finished or that we are about to finish. But since the touring started again for Daniela, it sometimes takes a little longer to finish certain tracks, but we are about to finish them in the next few weeks and come up there with new music as well. And well, I'm trying to be as productive as I can for whatever project that I am just working with and for. So there will definitely be new music from me.
Well, we look forward to it. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you for having me.
You take care now.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.